Okay, good morning. How is everybody today?
Good.
Good. So we just came off of lesson 2, unit 3, lesson 2, and you guys were learning about nationalism. You were learning about expansionism. You were learning about imperialism. Okay, and with imperialism, one of the things we learned was it went beyond the borders of the United States, and then it went into the European theater, if you will, the country of Europe. Okay, and all the countries in Europe. And so one of the things that's interesting about it all, or we mentioned first thing this morning before lunch, one of the things that we saw is we saw that alliances and treaties were very important during that time. Okay, and so those alliances and treaties, we talked about friendship, right? You remember about the friendship? What about friendship? Does anybody remember what we talked about with that? About friendship? Do you remember about how important it was to make friends in the first place? And is a friend just someone that says that they're your friend?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, no, what is it? A friend is also someone that does what? That, yes, that helps you. And they can come alongside you and they can say, you know, bud, and it's not just laughing and giggling and cutting up and stuff like that, but it goes beyond that. A friendship is also being willing to put your arm around somebody and say, listen, bud, you're getting ready to mess this up. How many of you had a friend good enough like that? That you were able to do that you were able to talk to each other at such a level to where it helps you to grow in your friendship with other people. And so that's what we're doing when we're heading into World War I and World War II. We keep going through all this. That's one of the things we find out. We find out about alliances, and alliances build treaties to help support one another. And so I want to give you the opportunity. We started with some lessons this morning, at least the timeline this morning with a few things. This is the last thing we talked about in the 1920s, which is way after. We're talking about the beginning of the 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, and but into the 20s we talk about the nation of what? What is that?
Germany.
We talk about the nation of Germany that goes into a depression, and America's economy does very well during that time. Because the economy does very well, Americans start buying and spending and spending and spending and doing very well. But across Europe, they're in debt. After World War I, they're in debt because of the war. And when they're in debt because of the war, they can't afford to pay their bills. And so they're starting to ask other countries that lent them some money, hey, you got some more money you can lend me so that I can pay off our war debt? And so, and everybody's saying, no, we don't have this money. And that's how the Depression began in Europe, and then eventually it came to America too. So there's a lot that's involved with that. So on this sheet that we've got today, we have been introducing to you, or I have been introducing to you, Unit 3, Lesson 3, about World War I and the Communist Revolution. Anybody know what is a communist? What does that mean? Does anybody know what communism is? You don't know what communism is? So we talked about someone who is a dictator, someone who comes in and rules a country. So if you go back to some of the stuff and get out your unit sheet if you would, and there's a couple vocabulary words. You've seen these before, but I haven't listed on the board. But if you look at your unit sheet, one of the things that you'll find, let's scroll down to communism to start off with, because we just talked about alliance and treaty. I'll come back to that here in just a second. But communism. So if you look at that, you can write this down on your unit sheet on the back. Some of you don't have those words filled in. Now would be the time to fill those words in. Okay? So 15. This is the last one on your unit sheet. And it says communism. This is what communism is. It's a group of people, a government that has complete control of a nation's people and the economy through the military. So in other words, it's someone that's a dictator. A communist government is a dictator. Someone that comes in and rules by what? Look up here.
Military.
And rules by a military. And when they rule by the military, one of the things that they do is they come in and they take over the current government. Okay? And they do it by force. And that's one of the things that we see starting with World War I and moving on into World War II. Is we see communism sticking its ugly head up, rearing its ugly head up, and then showing that certain people are going to take ground. Now, when we talk about communism, communism is a form of government. But one of the things that goes hand in hand with it is a type of economy. And that economy, money, okay, that economy is a thing known as not just communism, but also I can't think of it now. Well, anyway, so communism is that when the government comes in, the military rules a nation. Now, there's a type of socialism is a type of economy that goes hand in hand with communism. But the thing with socialism again, it's a type of economy, and what happens is they say that everybody shares everything. Everybody shares it. Doesn't that sound like a great idea, sharing everything with everybody? Share my money, share my resources, share everything with you. But what socialism says is you can't have anything individually. It's all collectively what we get, okay? But the government gets everything else. The government is in control of everything. So in a socialistic economy or a communist nation, the government issues out the jobs, the housing, the food, the whatever else. They issue out everything that the people have. And that's when they start cookie cutting people and saying, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is where you live, this is what you eat. One of my first mission trips that I took was in Moldova. And Moldova is in between Romania and the Ukraine. In their former Soviet Union, World War II, former Soviet Union places. And with those former Soviet Union places, they're no longer ran by a certain government, by a communist government. They're an individual nation now. But in Moldova, one of the things that I saw is they were coming out of having communist control. And the people were almost lost because one of the things that they saw is that they needed to have direction. They were used to the jobs being issued. There were no jobs unless they created them. They were used to housing being issued to them, and all of a sudden this housing was run down. It was horrible, dilapidated buildings and old homes and things like that. And the same thing with what they ate. So one of the things I thought was really interesting was we went there and we stayed in host homes. You know what a host is? Someone that welcome you to their home. So we went into the homes, and some people for breakfast, they offered us hot dogs for breakfast. And now hot dogs on a bun. There's hot dogs on a bun. All right? And to you, it may seem weird because we don't usually eat hot dogs for breakfast, right? All right, but they're offering you the best of what they have, guaranteed. And so that, at that time, for them, was the best of what they had. And so that's one of the things I noticed all throughout my whole trip in Moldova. And one of the things that was interesting too is it didn't matter. There could be a certain time of the day or the night that they would say they'd cut the power, and no one would have electricity. It's the government trying to control the people and let them know, hey, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. So just take note of that. Remember that communism and what goes along with it. What was the name of the economy? Do anybody remember? Socialism. And that's the name of the economy. And that says that everybody shares everything except for the government. The government doesn't share what they have. Only the people share what they have. But the government gets everything that they want. Okay? All right. So let's move up and into the first one. We talked a little bit earlier about an alliance or a treaty. Okay, an alliance or a treaty. Just a second about friendships, we talked about that. An agreement made by two or more nations that helps protect each nation involved. Okay, again, friendships, you want to form a treaty with somebody. That's when you reach out the hand and you shake the hand with somebody and you say, I not only want to be your friend, but I also want to help you with the resources that I have. And so people come into treaties. Now, treaties can be good if they're followed. But if they're not followed, guess what? Everything goes in shambles. It goes back to the way it was. Wars happen, battles happen, people are killed, everything that happens during that time, unless they're in and they stick to the treaty. That's very important. And we learned that back in the United States during expansionism across the West. How the Indians were relocated, and then the American government they took back what they said. They didn't want that to be involved. So, so as you're filling out your sheet, one of the things I want you to fill in when it comes to alliance and treaty, those can be good things, but they can also be bad things as well, at least a treaty. Because with an alliance, you're hoping that that friendship will help you and not wait until you turn your back and want to hurt you or harm you in any way. All right, so next, number 14, as we're going through this vocabulary, I'll just continue to fill it out if you haven't done it already. Trench warfare. Trench warfare is a type of fighting used during World War I. We're almost done with this section. Used during World War I, it utilized ditches to protect the soldiers and defend the land both sides were fighting for. Here's a perfect example. I'll come back to it in just a second. Just give me some time. I'm going to go to this trench warfare thing. I want you to see it. Oh, here it is. All right. So if you look up here on the screen, I know to this right now, this doesn't look like anything to you except for a bunch of squiggly lines and boxes. All right. But to me, this is the trench warfare. All right. All right, so if you look right here in this area, this is a trench. It's a dugout ditch, a deep ditch that's about as tall as a person is high. So that's how deep it is. And the soldiers would walk around in the ditch and then wait for an opportunity that they can stick their gun out and shoot the enemy. Okay? And here's the enemy on this side. They're doing the same thing. They're hanging out in the trenches. They're not really fighting continuously, unlike we saw in many other wars through the years with them. But the people would do that. Now there is all in the middle and all behind the ditches and everything else, so nobody can come behind them. They also had barbed wire. They had all kind of ammunition boxes and things like that. Maybe some places where if you stepped, it would blow up and kill you. You know, they had all these places. This is called no man's land. Okay, and with no man's land, what it would do is most people didn't want to fight in the first place. And so they hid out in these trenches. And when they hid out in these trenches, very little entanglements with the enemy happened. So there was a movie that came out several years ago called War Horse. Anybody ever see that before? On one of the things like social media or something, they had a movie out. It was called War Horse, and it was about this horse that was bought and sold and traded throughout Europe during this time. And this war horse would hide in the trenches with the soldiers, but the soldiers didn't want to do anything. And the war horse would get out of the trenches every once in a while. And when he did, the soldiers didn't want him to get shot. And so the soldiers would jump out of the ditches to get the trenches to get this horse to come back in. If we have time, hopefully we can watch that clip of that movie. I think it would be really neat. But this horse wanted the war to be over. It would make it think that the horse doesn't think that way, but at the same time, I think it's a good idea to look at that. And we'll look at that more in depth later, but this is a good example of trench warfare that happened during World War I. Does anybody have any questions about that? Nothing with that? Okay, great. All right, so we're about ready to go for today. So go ahead and put your sheets back, your unit sheets and your note sheets back up in your white things, white folders. And go ahead and collect those and put those up, and we'll continue to do a few other things tomorrow.